Folks, welcome inside the Parisi Palace, high above 3773 East Broadway. This is the Jake Feinberg Show, company on Power Talk. Thank you so much for making us part of your day today, and really have had some great dialogue with my next guest. He has approached these transmissions with an open heart and always coming at it with a lot of philosophical aptitude and a lot of content, and it really is an honor to talk to somebody who is transparent and did get the memo about being a real human being. And his son's birthday today, so I'm sure they have some festivities planned for this evening. Peter Erskine, welcome back to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Thank you, Jake. That all sounded like a very polite way of saying that I got a big mouth, but
can you talk a little bit? I know it's, what is your, I don't know if we talked about this, let me know, but I am struck. Did you find Eastern philosophy in your life at some point, or what has been your spiritual compass in your life?
Well, I was raised in a family that was not so adherent or observant of any, particular religious doctrine. But my oldest sister Lois was always interested in Far Eastern, as it was known at the time. The Orient, wise things from the Orient.
Yeah, exactly.
And I remember a book, I think it was called Wise Things from the Orient, that I found in her library after she'd gone off to college, I guess, and I began reading it, and as the title would suggest, these were just little bon mots of pearls of wisdom, but they did make some sort of impression, and it might have opened me up for an appreciation for not only the Orient, but more specifically Japan. I visited Japan for the first time when I was 19 years old with the Stan Kenton Band, and I was, I fell in love with the place, with the people. And much of that just had to do with the apparent kindness that everyone seemed to, the consideration that people showed for each other, the pervading sense of harmony.
Did you know that? Paul Jackson, he said the same. Rest in peace. He said the same. He lived out his remaining years there, the bass player with Herbie, and he said that they live. Buddhism is not a religion. They live that life there.
Yeah, and I know that Paul loved being in Japan, and I did get to run into him one time over there. It's Japan is to live there is one thing. It's quite different than visiting there, and I don't know if I would have the easiest of times if I spent a lot of time there. But when I wrote my book No Beethoven, we were there for a couple of months, and I found it illuminating and just really felt good for my soul. Japan's the kind of place that when the door of the jet opens at either Narita Airport or maybe the airport in Osaka, but generally Narita outside of Tokyo, and I get that scent of Japanese air. I feel more at home there than just about any place else on earth.
I love this.
I don't know why, but
that's great.
My wife is from Japan, but she loves it here in California, as long as our kids live here, I can't imagine being far away from them. But our son, as you mentioned, it's his birthday. He did get us to subscribe to a it's 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 like a news service. Every week we get an email, and it's called "Cheap Houses in Japan," and it's just all these really great bargain listings of homes. Because of, I guess, the change in demographics there were quite a few homes are becoming available that are not so expensive. In other words, the price trends seem to be going maybe the opposite direction of at least the way prices are going in this country.
That's right. No, it's interesting. But of course, the square footage is very small for cats like me or Peter Erskine, I think,
We enjoy a lot of square footage here. I mean, by Japanese standards,
I did.
mean, the house we live in is pretty Leave It to Beaver modest, single story, but we love our home, and I hope there's never any reason that we'd have to leave in terms of political upheaval.
Right.
Or worse fears being realized by our democracy being stolen from us.
Absolutely. No, it's insane to be even talking about it, but it's really very real.
I hope it doesn't come to that. And I'm enjoying being part of the faculty at the Thornton School of Music, and this will be an interesting summer because I made a commitment to not go to Europe. Didn't take a whole lot of reading of the tea leaves to figure out that this would not be a good summer to go there. I just wasn't comfortable with the idea. Although a lot of my friends and colleagues will be touring, but I wanted to stay home and a couple long range projects I want to work on. We have a new album that's coming out next month that we recorded in Italy during this whole sweet spot of being able to travel, and that was in November, and it's called Live in Italy. It's myself and Alan Pasqua and Dark Oles, and I think you say this every time you put out a CD, but this might be the best one yet. So I'm really thrilled about that, and I've been wanting to one project I've been wanting to work on, and I hope I'll be able to realize it, is a photo book. I've been taking not only a lot of pictures, but I've been going through all my files and kind of continuing in the tradition, dare I say, of like some of the work that Milt Hinton did, documenting sessions and his colleagues, and I got a lot of photos, and I've been posting maybe more than I ought to on
Wait, hold on. I just
media.
need to stop you. You're telling me Hinton was like kind of like an ethnomusicologist kind of cat? I didn't know that.
No, he was just a wonderful photographer.
Oh, that's awesome.
Just took pictures, took photographs of. He always had his camera with him. Wow. And one of my favorite photos that I have in my personal archives is a photo of Mr. and Mrs. Milt Hinton, and behind them on this train in Japan are Mike and Randy Brecker.
Oh, it's such a lead. Have you shared that one on the new media yet? That would warm some hearts.
Go to my Facebook
I'll check
personal page and do a search for either Milt Hinton or Mike or Randy Brecker. But yeah, a lot of photos, and interestingly, pretty much the whole time I was in Weather Report, I was the only guy that bothered to carry a camera around. And that was just not, I don't know what it was. I mean, Jocko liked having his photo taken, but he also would be the first to bring up, like, to quote Native American, and Native Americans and their reluctance to have their photo taken as the belief that part of the soul is captured to the sitting model's detriment. I don't know anything to that, but I would make notations in my diary, and I would just whenever one of those guys said something that I thought was either funny or outrageous, I'd write it down. I just didn't want to forget it. So um, yeah, I think a photo book maybe with a few anecdotes here and there would be a fun thing. And the pandemic provided a good opportunity for me to do a lot of scanning of negatives. And uh, it's interesting, the nature of digital uh, photos and digital files is if you're not careful, you could lose a whole bunch of photos really quick. But I've got these like shoe boxes of photos from the 1960s on
Oh,
that
I
I,
mean,
I
yeah.
can't seem to get rid of.
Well, I just want to, talking to Peter Erskine here in set 3, I want to read this quote to you, and then I'll tell you who it is. Just going back to Japan for a minute. He said, I didn't want to join the army. I wanted to get drafted. If you joined, it was 3 years. If you got drafted, it was 2 years. I lucked out and got into a band in Japan. We landed in Sendai. That's where my base was. No one had heard of Sendai before the terrible earthquake and tsunami. My first night in Sendai, I thought someone had picked me up and threw me on the floor. Coming from the East Coast, that was my first earthquake in 1954. We were
I know
there.
who this is.
I know you do, but I have a larger question. We were there to improve our relations with Japan. The war had been over for 10 years. It was still fresh in the Japanese people's minds that we were the bad guys. We hooked up with the Japanese Army band. We traveled up and down the country, bettering relations, showing that both Army bands could work together and play together. We did concerts going up and down the country. That is our late brother, my uncle, late uncle, spirit uncle, Emil Richards. But I just would, the
Yes,
floor is yours. Because Peter, I mean, I was born, I was late to the game, but to me, Phil Wood said it to me too. He said, the music that the world embraced after the darkness of World War II was jazz. It was a music of inclusivity, tolerance, freedom, and conversation. And you mentioned going to Japan, and obviously you went a little bit later with the Stan Kenton band, but I kind of wanted you to just talk about that magic, because in today at USC and in compositions, I mean, this is a prodigious music, and with lots of people have lots of facility and technique, and there's lots of gymnastics that are done on the bandstand. But you go back to Emil and the dudes. I mean, he ran into Toshiko in the bars there. Hampton Hawes was there. Jazz was this music of inclusivity, and I just wanted to know when you picked up on that vibe, how early in your life you dug that.
Well, I mean, immediately, because jazz recordings were not only straight ahead bebop. When I was a kid, I had all the recordings of the Art Blakey was making with the African Drum Ensemble, and the stuff that Max Roach was doing.
Right.
And then stuff on the West Coast, and some of it was kind of like the Bachelor Space Age kind of music of Les Baxter and
Yeah,
Esquivel,
totally.
and these characters, Martin Denny, and all this stuff.
Right.
But a couple of thoughts. If we go to the late 50s and particularly the early 60s, think about even popular music, Jake. And in America, let's go early 60s.
Mm.
We had hit pop singles. We had Japan. You had Sukiyaki. You had Volare from Italy. You had Bert Kaempfert and all sorts of songs from Germany.
Absolutely.
And Dankeschön and all that. And this is like even pre-Beatles, and you had the Singing Nun and various chansons from France, and all of a sudden Walt Disney premieres the ride or attraction. It's a Small World at the
Wow.
at the 1964 World's Fair, and we embraced, as a nation, we were hungry and we welcomed music from all over the world. It was, and you had and Ed Sullivan, just about every week there would be. I'd be interested to see if that was part of their booking thing to have a quote international act, but the airwaves were filled with that. The airwaves were also filled with jazz because every composer that got a gig writing either the theme music or the underscore for TV shows, they all had jazz training. So I Dream of Jeannie, Bewitched,
Swinging.
Yeah, it was all swinging music, and so you heard jazz. Even the pop radio stations, their when they would do their call letters, it was all kind of jazzy, and so we all heard jazz everywhere. It was natural. I mean, Jocko and I, this formed so much of our conversational ease because we both grew up listening to the same stuff. I mean, you know what Weather Report used to play at sound checks?
I'd love to know.
We would play The Days of Wine and Roses or Goldfinger. We played a theme from Goldfinger.
That was priceless, man. My God.
That was like what we'd like to. We're not going to play the tunes, That was like the last thing those guys wanted to play. So we would, we usually start, or Fascination, da 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 da. And Jocko would play it, and Joe go, yeah, my father loved this song, and then Wayne would join in it, and so we would, it was like just a celebration of that whole thing. This is interesting that you started this conversation here because yesterday I was walking our dog, and I was listening to Fresh Air and. The whole walking the dog, listening to podcasts thing.
Sure.
And I didn't want to. I think I'd already listened to the newest one, so I'm looking like what else is there. And there was an interview with Kazuo Ishiguro, who has just published a new book called Clara and the Sun, and he was the same author as Remains of the Day.
Mm-hmm.
And I was surprised to hear he has this lovely lilting English accent, but he was born in Nagasaki, and because of his being born in Nagasaki, the conversation naturally turned to what was his awareness of Nagasaki and being born in post-war Japan. Now, my wife was born a few years before Ishiguro, because I'm the same age as him, and he was born in 1954. So she was much more of a post-war baby. But he phrased it in a way that I found very interesting. That he said, post-war there was the relationship between Japan and the United States was very much a honeymoon, and the Japanese were predisposed to, okay, that happened, let's move on, and I think the United States viewed Japan as a very necessary ally and a bulwark against the communist blocs that were forming with Russia and China, etc. So America had vital interest and I'm quoting Ishiguro here. Japan very quickly became this glittering kind of very prosperous society, and so with good-hearted soldiers like Emil Richards, and who was also a great musician, and the intent of everyone, like, let's leave the horrors of war behind us. It was a real blossoming of a lot of really good energies, and Toshiko and Sadao Watanabe coming to America,
right.
And doing so much musical good here, and then bringing it back to Japan. I mean, they're both very big heroes of mine.
And they were embraced.
As was Emil. As was Emil.
Well, I mean, my God, the guy just took me under his wing like 10 years ago and just was one of my biggest
wonderful
supporters, man. I love the guy so much. And it's like, and Toshiko comes here and she's working the Hickory House and becomes close with Oscar Pettiford. And I don't know, it just seemed like, I mean, we look at now and this sort of angst as it relates to white America, the history that white America perceives, and as the sort of multicultural gumbo of this country continues to change. I mean, the mother of my children is Taiwanese, so I spent many months over in Taiwan, and I also, very similar vibe to Japan in some senses but different also. And I just feel like it was like such a gas, man, because in jazz, it was really a black subculture, but it was inclusive. You had Toshiko coming in, being accepted. If you could play, you were accepted. And it was also really, at that point, still popular American music. It just sort of brings a smile to my face to think about Emil in a fusion band, in a band of American and Japanese bands going up and down the country, playing music and symbolically sort of healing that wound of the war. It's just, there's just some kind of magic there, and it seemed to really, it carried the day for a hot minute. But it's
positively. Hey man, I was working on this television, working on this television broadcast of this theatrical production with Leonard Nimoy, and I was writing the music, and on a break, Leonard Nimoy comes up to me, he goes, I don't think I ever told you this, but I played drums with Red Garland. I went, huh?
This is it. Thank you. You just made my year, dude.
And they said, we were stationed down in Mississippi or somewhere, and Duke Pearson was there, and I forget, he mentioned a few other musicians, and he said they wanted to try a different drummer than the guy that was in their assigned band or something. So they found out that Leonard played a little bit of drums, and so he got to do a couple gigs. That's about as far as that lasted. But
well, no, what was funny is that Mike Clark chimed in on a post of mine yesterday from my interview with Joe Lovano. He was talking about taking over for Joe Farrell, your dear friend, in the Thad Jones, Mel Lewis band. Every chart said Joe, it was all Joe's stuff. But Mike chimed in and said, I don't think he said he was in New York in the 80s or in the 70s. He was walking by a club and he heard a drummer. He heard like a rhythm. The patterns were like elven kind of patterns. And he walked in and Joe was playing drums.
Lovano.
No, Farrell.
Farrell.
Yeah, Farrell.
Oh.
So Nimoy, I mean, this is what I love is just like this elasticity of no barriers, man. It wasn't like you got to choose an instrument, you got to declare a major. It was like, dude, Leonard Nimoy was swinging with Garland, Farrell's playing drums. It was, and even I just interviewed Dash Crofts from Seals and Crofts. Still doesn't read music to this day, and I'm not condoning that. I'm just saying he played 6 different instruments. It was just like a very beautiful, fertile time, and we got to get down to brass tacks here.
Let me
go ahead. Yeah, please.
Because you and I, we don't want to, be the old guys. We don't want to.
I'm 44. I got an old soul.
Well, okay, good.
No, I did. I did.
But here's what I see happen.
Yeah, go ahead.
Because the level of playing ability has never been as good as it is now, and maybe some teachers can pat themselves on the back that something right is being done, because young musicians are playing stuff that we didn't even dream was possible. Um, and some of it goes one way, some of it goes another way. What I'm missing um, in the songs of
Yes,
today, and
yes.
you try to put your finger on it, like, okay, it's a limited harmonic structure. Well, they said that in the '60s too. The old, there's just three chords kind
Yeah,
of
I
thing.
do.
But you know what's missing? I think
Hmm.
bridges. Nobody writes a fucking bridge
No, yeah, the
anymore.
bridges, man. That's one of the components of it.
Yeah, there's just the songs just don't go anywhere.
That's why,
It's
because the
just like,
bridge always, that what a great word. That's what the bridge
yeah,
was. It was a pathway towards new conscious, new sound, and then you come
right. It
back to
was a
the theme.
release. Exactly. And somehow that got lost. And I'm like, I would really welcome that some songs would maybe bring that back because you get in your car and a lot of the cars now have kind of smart radio functions. So you play one thing and it'll find you other stuff similar. So
Do
I
you
got
think,
into
I want
this.
to ask you one more thing, just because I don't want us to be considered the old fart guys. Do you think that we're living? I talked to an amazing sousaphone player yesterday, John Altieri, and we were talking about just
Mhm.
how everything is connected now. World music is connected. Do you think that it would behoove, I don't want to say the bean counters, but the people that, the commerce of whatever is part of music, that do we, is it, are we definitely living in a post genre music time now? I mean, there at a certain period of time, you went into
You-
a Woolworths and you'd find a Blackwood Brothers record, and then you'd find a Gary
right.
Bartz record. So they had to figure out ways of dividing it. But
You're
now it's got.
you're completely asking the wrong guy because I just don't even know what the music business is
I
right
know. Okay. Well, I was just gonna say, did
now,
you?
right?
Yeah,
I just,
exactly. Yeah.
I know what.
Well, then let's just play
I
name that voice, and let's just play name that voice. This is gonna. I think you're gonna chuckle with this, and then we'll come back.
okay.
Spiritual thing is basically when you're playing, and it's just not bebop. This is other music too, but bebop is in jazz is probably that's the high end of what we do as jazz musicians. But just the spirituality comes from it's like something. Now this may sound abstract, but it's something that Wayne Shorter said to me one time. He said that the only way you can really, really, really play is that you have to go to the store and buy some milk for your grandmother. You know, and when he said that to me and the drummer Omar Hakim, now he had a few drinks, a few old drinks.
Right.
I said, "Wow!" But a couple days later, it hit me, because it's like to come if you have one of those kind of families. You go to see your grandmother. She says, "Go to the store and get me some milk," and you go there. There's a love. There's a love for something other than just what you're looking at. It's like your own personal love, which could come from God, which could come from the force of life. It could be whatever it is that you think makes you tick.
Mm-hmm.
That if you tap into that, whatever that is, it's not a material. It's not the instrument. It's not the notes. It's the life force. And that is very, when you operate on that band, that's or on that frequency in life, that is very spiritual.
All right, Mr. Erskine, you want to take a guess at who that is?
I'm a little thrown because I mean he's talking about the drummer Omar, but that doesn't sound like Victor's voice.
No, that
Um,
he mentioned the trio was Omar on drums, Wayne, and then that cat was a bass player. That was my first interview with Stanley Clark.
well, that was
Yeah,
Stanley.
nobody can understand the phone. The voice never comes across on the phone. But
Yeah, the frequencies get all.
Erskine, the
Okay.
floor is yours. He's like sitting there, obviously a little buzzed. Wayne said the only way you can really play spiritual music is it's like the going to the store to get your grandma some milk. And I just want you to talk about what that means to you. Does that translate over? And ultimately, is that the music that you were able to? because it's a feeling that goes beyond just like, I mean, like later in the clip, he's like, I'm sure Coltrane liked buying, nice blue suits or a nice car, but that's not why he was playing the music. It was ordained. And I just want you to take the floor on that.
Well, okay. I mean, it's the simple takeaway for me is Wayne is just reaffirming that in order to play, you have to live. And to speak of the time when I had the opportunity to be making music with Wayne, I was, I think, more consumed with, I think, wrestling with not the musical gods so much, but definitely with the musical elements, because I mechanically didn't quite. I didn't understand the instrument as well as I would eventually, and I also didn't understand some of the. I had good intentions, but I always felt I didn't understand also the mechanics of how tension and release work, and so I think my brute force married to the jazz experience I had was kind of a cool addition to the band, and Jocko also played well with me. But I would be a very different drummer now if I had the chance to play with them. And I remember Zavano once came up to me and said, Wayne and I are talking about putting the band together again, but we're not going to call you. And I said, okay. And he said, because you're a different drummer now. I said, yeah. And we both kind of looked at each other, and it wasn't like you're not as good, or there was no qualitative thing. We just understood it was more of a quantitative. It was, I was a different player, and at that point in time, I was working on doing these trio albums for the ECM label, and even though I could still smack it out if I had to, I was trying to understand music, and I was midstream for that stuff. And now, I mean, when I did my Dr. project, it was a chance to kind of revisit some of this music, and this is playing a young man's music, in your 60s, and it was fun to be able to do that. And I can still play with a big band. I can still do some of the electronic stuff, and not keel over dead, from a heart attack. Not yet, anyway.
Thank God. No. I mean, you said a couple of things. You said what Wayne is really talking about at the core is to lead a life or to live a life. What can you go a little bit deeper about that? Like your life is reflected in your music, but I mean, like you said, you already kind of had that jazz existence. I mean, you were taking that bus with you had to learn to, I still don't understand how you learned to sleep upright, like in the seats. But I mean, talk about the life experience within the music, and ultimately, like, go ahead.
I think the life experience, Jake, is just, all right, I'll approach this subjectively.
Go wherever you want to go. Yeah.
I left pretty much, left home to go to this musical boarding school, and then I left school at 18 to go on the road. And that's a great experience to get to play, but it's a pretty warped point of view. Because you're spending a lot of time just traveling from here to there with a lot of other guys that are traveling from here to there, and right. And the priorities I did, yeah. So yeah. That's not necessarily living, and so I would do the best that I could when we got to a place that, I would try to go to the local art museum. I would try to do some sightseeing. And what's interesting with Weather Report was, when we would get to Venice, Italy, Joe Giaco and I were like, come on, let's ride in a gondola. We've never ridden in one of these things. Let's go on the canals. And, come on, Wayne. You didn't want to. Someplace else. Come on, Wayne. We were after a concert. This gypsy band was playing in this. This was in the former Yugoslavia. This amazing band was playing with the hammered dulcimer and this incredible clarinet player. And Joe's like, Peter, go get Wayne, man. He's got to hear this. And he wouldn't come out of his room. He just was, So we kind of viewed ourselves as, hey, we're living, but again, that was a pretty narrow thing because again, you're constrained by the demands of the travel. And so, we were tourists here and there. So the chance to really live, I think, Wayne was exploring more of the internal life than the rest of us were, and we didn't always understand that or get that. And when you quote or bring up Wayne, I think everyone would agree that Wayne is so singular person and musical force that in both a good and in both on a practical level, he's kind of incomparable. You really can't compare him to anyone else. I
mean, Rico.
Sometimes, I'm sorry. I was just going to say sometimes what Wayne would say would have great wow, that's brilliant. And other times you go like, that's okay, like that's all right. And I don't know if I mentioned to you when I visited Wayne in his new home.
No. And
up in the Hollywood Hills, and his old house faced the valley, and this new home faces Hollywood. And if anyone's familiar with the canyons or the Hollywood Hills, windy roads to get to or from a home in that part of town. And so, I drove up there, and it was just one of those drives that it seemed to take a long time. And I'm sitting in the kitchen with Wayne, and I was like, wow, Wayne, nice house. It's a great view. I said, you like it here, right? He goes, yeah. And then I asked him, but what do you do if you need butter? And he looked at me, and he turned and looked at the refrigerator and looked back at me and just said, who needs butter? So it's kind of funny when you quote, got to get your grandmother some milk.
Right. Right. Who needs butter?
Wayne likes to juggle all those things. And I threw him the soft pitch to do it.
I mean, Rico said that on that tour, because they did a European tour, Japan, and I mean, he'd walk down the hall and Wayne would be in his room just chanting all day until the show. And then one time Greg walked in, he's like, I forget what he said. What he's like, why are you chanting like that all the time? And Wayne sort of looked at him and was like, I'm waiting for that next $1 million. Something really bizarre. So I mean, there was this to me, the life you were in the, you were sort of in this music camps, and then you landed a nice paying gig. I mean, at the time, it wasn't glamorous, but you making
Weather Report?
No,
yeah.
the Kenton gig. The Kenton gig.
Kenton?
Yeah.
I didn't pay that well.
No. I mean, come on. But I'm saying you weren't starving to death, on the street.
No. I did. So I joined the Kenton band.
Yeah.
And I'm riding the elevator this gig was in a hotel, the jazz club in a hotel, and I'd been on the band for about 4 days. And it's just me and Stan Kenton on the elevator. And Stan goes, Peter, we haven't discussed money yet. So I went, okay.
How long into the tour was this?
No, I mean, you join and you're there. For that first tour was 50 weeks out of the year we were on the road. So, so Stan says, Peter, we haven't discussed money yet. And I said, okay, how much do you want? And he laughed, and I think that was good, maybe for an extra $25.
Yeah, no, that was a very bright move. That was good. That's a good line. It's nice.
But the chanting thing was funny because you remember Leo Sayer?
Yeah.
So Jocko and I'm afraid I might have thought of this. I'm embarrassed to say, but when we would get off the bus, and we'd usually be quicker to get off the bus if it arrived to a hotel or whatever, we'd walk by Wayne, because Wayne, usually Jocko and I would sit back in the middle, and I think Joe and Wayne like to sit more towards the front.
Sure.
Anyway, as we'd walk by Wayne, we'd start singing. You make me feel like chanting. I want to chant my life away. We do like a little disco dance.
I love
it. and we never like, hey Wayne, are you cool with that? We just, we just did it. Yeah, I don't know. I hope no one was offended by that. I'm not.
No, I think you were just trying to keep
chanting works has worked wonderfully for a lot of people. Wayne, I think, was probably, when I joined the organization, he was the only guy chanting in the band or in the crew that I was aware of. And he'd sometimes do it in public, and I think Joe was not thrilled about that, But Joe and Wayne had they're interesting, the tension, because I think Joe felt, and he may have wanted it to be that way because Joe liked running a lot of the show, but then he felt he had to just take care of too much of the day-to-day stuff.
Were you there's a bunch of stuff.
Joe would confide to me. Wayne would never pull me aside and confide something. It was always Zabel telling me something.
Were you guys sometimes, setting aside how absolutely brilliant and singular Wayne is as a musician, was it flummoxing, or like why he wouldn't, I don't know, just in a band like that, like where you're going to see some burning Yugoslavian, like, did it, like sometimes, there's just like, you want to give a little bit of grief to somebody in a joking way, just because they never were part of they never came into the posse, so to speak. They were just always sort of removed.
No, it's funny. As I think back on it, if I just visualize like the photos, when I first joined and when it was the quartet, it was definitely a Four Musketeers vibe. I think as time went on and when we became a quintet, then it just was more Jocko, Joe, and I became more, the three of us would hang out, and then it would either be me and Joe or me and Jocko, because Joe and Jocko started drifting apart. The stuff that's been chronicled elsewhere. I don't need to get into all that now.
Absolutely not. I did want to ask you about.
Can I circle back?
Please. I don't think we actually finished up. Also, I did the other part of that before it was just the idea that, if I heard you correctly, you were still evolving as a drummer and kind of missed, at least in your mind, you weren't cultivated musically as much as you were later. But then when Joe came to you later and was going to put the band back together, he actually was complimenting you about your playing when you were in Weather Report. Did I understand that correctly?
Well, I think so.
Yeah.
I don't know. I jumped at the chance to get to work with Joe kind of just a steps ahead was really getting somewhere. But I said I want to try to complete the picture here on this, and there was I thought I would be able to do both, and you really can't be in more than one band at a time.
Right.
And that's why I left Weather Report to join Steps in the first place. And then I went back to work with Joe in this ill-fated weather update that didn't last very long. And so this was a few years later when Joe and I always had very cordial get-togethers, reunions, wherever we would be. He mentioned to me, and nothing had ever happened, but he was going to do something, and maybe that Paco Seri would play, because Paco was the drummer he was really enjoying working with, and he wanted to hear Paco play more of that music, I guess. And so that venture of Weather Report regrouping never came about. But when Weather Update came along, it was just a reflection of all that music that was kind of going on then. But I think, Jake, all along, what I really wanted, and I never saw the videos till later, but you can find them now, of like Gravatt or Alphonse Muson. I just wanted to play a 4-piece kit with 2 cymbals and an 18-inch bass drum, and that was the kind of Weather Report drummer I really wanted to be. And the band had gotten too loud by the time I joined to really pull that off, and I still didn't quite know how to do that. But I think in my heart of hearts, that's sort of like, for me, the epitome. I love Mysterious Traveler. Don't get me wrong, Heavy Weather is. I think I like all the albums I'm not on more than I like the albums I'm on. But
830's great, man.
But it's got some good moments. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. But like the way that Muzan and Gravatt played with the band, and the way the band sounded, that to me was like, that's what Weather Report really was.
I wanted to read this to you. I can only imagine the bands.
You didn't let me circle back.
Circle, baby. Yeah, go.
I'm circling back.
No, do it.
Toshiko. There's an album everyone. I want everyone. I'm going to recommend to everyone.
I want everybody to buy.
Yeah. No, I want everyone to. It's Toshiko Mariano Quartet. She was married to Charlie Mariano.
Absolutely.
The bass player is Gene Chirico.
The best.
Who was amazing. And the drummer is a 19-year-old Eddie Marshall.
Dude, my favorite drummer of the Fourth Way, man.
Before Weather Report. Fourth Way, it was amazing. But before the Fourth, you're exactly right. But before the Fourth Way, this young Eddie Marshall from Lenox, Massachusetts, he's like a missing link between Philly Joe and Tony for me.
Totally. Dude, I love that, dude. So explain the link between those two.
He's got Philly Joe hands, he's got the vocabulary, but he's got this cymbal beat and this forward propulsion thing. It's just like a hint of this is where it's probably going to go. And then Tony,
totally, dude.
Right?
Dude, right? You nailed it.
And it's just, and it was my same sister, Lois, who had this record. And I think that's around the same time I found this book, Why Sings from the Orient. And then, wow, Toshiko. And she, and her thing was, it was a very strong Bud Powell kind of element to her playing. And then Charlie Mariano, sounded like Charlie Mariano. And then when you hear Sadao Watanabe, still to this day, Sadao sounds like Charlie. He has that same. So anyway, it's this very Boston-soaked thing, and it's really cool, and it's a wonderful record.
Like
it's
65?
a lot of fun.
65?
No, wait, hold on. I got okay.
Because obviously, Eddie, the great thing about Eddie I mean, he was playing with trios, Ron McClure and those cats in New England, and then definitely hooked up.
This was recorded. Let me look at. It was recorded in 1960.
Whoa.
Yep.
Whoa. You know, I got to be honest. I'm not even. I'm not.
Yeah,
I got to check that.
It was released in 1961. The piano is like really out of tune. They recorded it in the NOLA penthouse. A lot of jazz records were made there, and for our younger listeners, it was the studio where most of the Sesame Street music was recorded over the years.
Now that's in New York, right? Not Boston.
That's in New York. Yeah,
wow.
that's in New York.
I'm not even hip to that.
Yeah, NOLA. It's on 57th Street. It's this penthouse. It's really cool. I did a little recording there with Diana Krall once. It was really a thrill to be there. I don't know, Mingus.
Eddie Marshall just dancing all over the kit. That's pre-Tony, and
yeah.
And then who was the other? And then Philly Joe was already well established. So that is so hip because I mean I can't stop listening to those early Fourth Way albums with Michael.
The Fourth Way was
Knock, Michael White. It's unbelievable. And Eddie is swinging. The whole thing just feels
before, like... That was before Weather Report.
Garibaldi said, Garibaldi said that very clearly, before Weather Report.
Yep. They were the first fusion band.
Yeah, right.
And then Weather Report was right after. And, of course, you can't forget that the seeds of Weather Report was what Roy McCurdy was doing with Zavino and Cannonball.
That seemed it was all. I mean, because because the McCurdy that I love, the live Cannonball, which was like basically parallel to the early Weather Report, you know, like Black Messiah and like the band that Cannon had with Airto, Buck Clark, Booker, McCurdy, Mike Dacey, who was basically a psychedelic country guitar player. That band, that was 73. That is just
wow. I'm not familiar because I'm going back just a few years earlier, like at the Operation Breadbasket.
Dude, I want to hip you to the early set because the stuff that was happening during the Gravatt Mouzon Weather Report paralleling Cannonball paralleling that is, and George Duke on all sorts of keyboards. I
got to hear this. This is exciting.
Yeah, no, it's very exciting.
But who was the drummer on I know the answer, but the Cannonball Accent on Africa album. Remember that one?
Dude, you're stretching me. No, because that's earlier than my Cannon years. Let me think about it. It wasn't Danny Richmond or anything, was it?
No. It was a studio album done at Capitol Records.
No, I know the cover. I just never knew the cover.
Yeah, he's on like this big sand dune.
Yeah.
And there's a model and like a wonderful, colorful dress behind him. And I think he's playing soprano sax on the cover. Earl Palmer.
Dude, that just warms my heart, dude. That is so classic. Yeah, it's just classic.
It's such a fun.
I'm almost positive that like when you find that like the original pressing of that album, I don't believe they list the accompanist on that. They could.
No, they don't.
Yeah, they don't. That is so.
So there was Zavino told me. I said, Joe, who's playing on the Lonely Man? It's Joe's composition, and because I was always intrigued by the drumming on it. He said, that's Earl Palmer. I said, oh, far out. Okay, it makes sense. And it totally is because there was another mystery drummer who was listed, and I just had to pay attention to look up the credits. Here's another recording I'm going to recommend to everybody. It's the Sinatra Swinging Brass album. Neil Hefti did all the writing. And you get to hear Earl Palmer playing big band with Sinatra, and it will blow your mind.
Oh, I'm sorry, Sinatra. What's the name of the album?
Swinging Brass.
Oh my God! And Palmer, and again, the accompanist are not listed. It's not listed though. It's just,
on that one, I think it is.
Wow.
I think Earl Palmer, the band's listed. You can find that.
And there's also like a great picture of the Limelighters album with Palmer off playing this small kit with them. That dude was a maniac. He was out of control and a heart of gold. Did you get a chance to meet him at all?
Yeah. Here's a great story. At one of the music trade shows, the NAMM show, the National Association of Music merchants or music merchandisers or music manufacturers. I always forget. Anyway, it's a big musical instrument maker trade show. And the Zildjian Company asked me to be the musical entertainment, and as part of this the festivities. So it's a free concert. So all the drummers in attendance to this convention are there. I had a lot of guys and women, and they were honoring Roy Haynes, Louis Bellson, and Earl Palmer. So I decided let's have fun. So for Louis, we did drum. What was it? He did it. He wrote it, and they played it in the Ellington Band. Anyway, it was a Louis tune that he did with the Ellington Band, and the Roy Haynes tune, Roy Haynes, from
right.
That Out in the Afternoon album. And I'm trying to remember what we played for Earl. We came over. Anyway, it was a real thrill to play for the three of them, and they're all these drummers, and then during this presentation thing, Steve Gadd was asked to come up on stage, and so we're posing for photos, and so it's Steve and myself, and there's Louis, and there's Roy, and there's Earl Palmer, and so Gadd says quietly, he goes, "Hey man, I gotta hand it to you." I said, "What?" He said, "You got a lot of balls." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Playing in front of all these drummers?" I said, "Hey, Steve, man, get me a gig." And he pauses in typical Gadd fashion, and then he just leans over and goes, "The size of coconuts."
Dude, that's the most beautiful. That's a beautiful compliment.
It's pretty left-handed, but I thought it was funny.
Oh man.
Did
you play like a Fats Dom? Because Earl was on the R&B circuits with Toussaint. I'm wondering if you played like some R&B tune for him.
Like Blueberry Hill or something.
Yeah, exactly.
No,
something that would elicit that response from Gadd, dude.
What? But here's a little bit of trivia that you and your listeners may or may not know. The scene in Zachariah where Elvin guns down.
I do. Yep.
And then plays the drum solo.
Yes.
And the drum set belongs to the band was the James Gang. Where Joe Walsh used to be the guitarist.
Oh my gosh, yeah, totally.
And so the drum set is a Ludwig kit, and then magically at some point before Elvin gets up there, it becomes a Gretsch kit. All right. So after Elvin gets up on the drums and starts playing, if you go back and watch it, really listen to it, especially with headphones, you'll start to hear it sounds like two drummers at one point, and then you hear it's one drum set, and then it kind of goes back to maybe sound. You're hearing like a faint echo or something, and they ran into some kind of an audio or synchronizing problem, audio and film problem with the footage. Okay, so they had to replace or overdub some drums to fix it. Who did they get? That's Earl Palmer.
Whoa.
Earl Palmer, and you'll hear the sound of the kit change, and that's Earl, and he's doing a pretty darn good Elvin.
Is that the only scene that Elvin plays drums in?
In that film? I don't know. Yeah, I guess. I never was able to watch the whole film all the way through. but I love Elvin's line. He said, "You should be home playing with your mother."
Dude, that man, God, I wish I knew. Erskine, before I let you go, because I know we're going to take a little bit of a break here for at least a little while.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to read this to you and get your feedback. I'm not sure. Did you ever tour with Carlos Santana with Weather Report?
No, no. He when he played on that one tune, and I wasn't there. He
So this is from.
came
I
in
just
and did
wasn't
it.
sure because the bass player in the '70s through the mid to late '70s, early '80s was a dear friend of mine, David Margan, and he
Hmm.
said this is what he told me in our last interview. He said after Santana, I would go and do these shows at the Lone Star Cafe in New York City with Alex Litcherwood. And Jocko would come down and hang out, and we got to be good friends. There was a lot of drinking and drug use during those days, but over time it did get to be pretty tragic. One time we were playing this gig. We booked 4 days at the Lone Star with Pat Thrall. And one night, Narda Michael Walden came down along with Paul Schaefer. All these cats were going to sit in. Jocko showed up, and he was so wasted that I couldn't let him sit in. Alex got him to dance, playing tambourine next to him, and he was happy to be on stage.
Mm.
And did you have closure with Jocko? I just, to me, I can't, I'm not an aficionado of his. I realize he was beyond genius in so many ways, and yet it broke my heart to hear that he disintegrated. And I mean, it's not uncommon for that to happen in the music life.
Well,
But I just wanted you to
it,
talk about the way, if you guys had closure because you made so many people, you made such great love on the bandstand.
well, I don't remember exactly when, those kind of lost years of the 55 Club and the Lone Star Cafe, but I believe it was after that that kind of dark period. Um, I went to see him at Seventh Avenue South,
Yeah.
and uh, it was the first time in all those years after Weather Report and his word of mouth band. Um, it was the first time since we had played together where I saw him holding the bass correctly, where he seemed to. Uh, he was very mindful of his technique, and he was very mindful of
Hmm.
hearkening back, I think, to a younger version of himself. And he said something very interesting to me, and I sensed that he was on some form of medication that was kind of moderating or modulating
Right.
his behavior a bit. But he said, hey, he said, I burned so many bridges that I just kind of went out and burned every last one I could possibly think of. So now I can start over again.
Hmm.
And you know, it breaks my heart to even tell that. Um, but that's what he said to me, and I took it as a declaration that he was going to get well again, and it was quite hopeful. And uh, I I I apologize. The time sequencing of all this, I might have it wrong, but it didn't seem to be too long afterwards when he had gone back down to Florida, and then we started hearing stories, and I heard that someone, hey, did you hear the latest about Jocko? And they're laughing. He's living in a tree house, ha ha ha. Um, it was almost like a punchline. And then when someone had mentioned he had lost either a front tooth or his front teeth, I didn't know what it was. I was terribly alarmed, and not too long after that was when he was beaten uh, so severely that it resulted in his death a couple of days later. Um, so
I just want to go back to
yeah,
holding. I want to go back to the holding the bass. The way he was,
mhm.
like in his own way. You were kind of interpreting that as like he was like, I'm just going to stop bucking convention and just do it and go back to the rudiments, so to speak. At least he was trying to get on the righteous path.
No, not convention. It was just that, you know, he wasn't high and he wasn't being a slob, and he was holding the bases. He had taught himself how to hold it. I mean, you know, in other words, it looked like, yeah, now he can play it again because he's not trying to do some gross impersonation of himself, because that's what it became. You know, it's just you know, he was the performing version of your coked out drunk uncle that has cornered you in a party somewhere. Did you guys
get locked in right away? Was there sort of a defining point when you guys, and did it happen maybe on a tour when you first joined the band? I'm just wondering how quickly.
Playing?
Yeah, when you just synced up. Yeah.
First note.
That's beautiful. See, that's
First
what's
note.
tragic about that's beautiful.
Well, you know, we were near the same age, and we had listened to a lot of the same stuff, and so we spoke the same language. So it was very easy for us to converse musically because we liked a lot of the same things. And the story I've told, and I don't mind telling again, that you know, a drummer named Alan Robinson had played with Jocko and Wayne Cochran's.
Dude, Alan he's one of the best cooks. I got to go eat his food, man. I know I've interviewed Alan. He talked about.
I know. I haven't had the pleasure yet of eating anything.
I haven't eaten anything. Go ahead, because he was playing.
We had a hell of a lunch together, though. I took him to this place in New Orleans.
Oh man, I got to get in on that next time, man. Jeez.
Peanut butter, jelly, and roasted duck.
Yeah, see, that's what I need that right now.
That is like, yeah, it's insane. So I listened to. All right, so I'm in college and I'm in this band with Alan Pasqua, and we were listening to Edgar Winter album. And
White Trash.
Yeah, the White Trash. And there's his drummer, Bobby Ramirez.
Monster drummer. Monster.
He was a great drummer. And so we were really into that. And then the bass player, he's still playing in Chicago. A bass player at Indiana University. His name was Eric Hochberg. Eric said, "Hey man, no, forget that stuff. You gotta be checking out this Wayne Cochran band." So, okay. And I went, "Oh, Wayne Cochran. I remember, you know, he used to be on the Jackie Gleason show, like, you know." So anyway, I get the record and I'm like, "Whoa, this is hip."
Yeah.
And they were like this road band, but they were, you know, the soulful thing. And there was this one tune, everybody trying to cut in on my groove. Or stop trying to cut in my.
Dude, Doc Kupka, Doc and Emilio were obsessed with that tune in Tower of Power. Unbelievable.
Oh, really?
Oh, I have a great. Dude, stop cutting in on my groove. The sickest. Unreal, dude.
Okay, yeah. So anyway, you know, I love that track, and I think it had an outsized influence in the way that I played backbeat stuff. So when Jocko heard me playing with Maynard. Unbeknownst to me, this influence was, I guess, manifesting itself. He recognized it, and that's why he told me. He said, "I'm gonna be calling you," and he pushed just based on having heard me this one time. He kept pushing for them to call me, and then as soon as we started playing, the lockup was like I said, first note. We didn't have to search and try to. We never talked about. You know, I've had those conversations with other people. We never talked about what to play. Not once with Jocko. Plenty of other things we might have done, but I don't ever remember.
I love
it. You know, except the one time he gave me the advice that's, you know, stop thinking so much, just concentrate. It's when he objected to Zawinul turning every sound check into a drum lesson, which Joe had a tendency to do.
Well, that's a whole other ship. Listen, many happy returns to your son, and
Thank you.
Let's reconnect down the road and do some more, man. I've just every time I have a ball.
I appreciate it. I hope I haven't worn out my welcome. And
no, man, keep swinging, man. Well, and if where are you in LA? Where are you at these days?
LA, yeah.
So if I'm when I'm out that way in the summer, if I'm on the road, maybe we can try to link up, grab some coffee or something. It'd be great to meet you.
Yeah, I would look forward to that. And if we can't find peanut butter and
peanut butter and jelly and duck and Alan Robinson,
I know where we can find some peanut butter and jelly.
Yeah, no, I'll bring the duck. I'll get a duck. I'll go to Chinatown and get a duck. All right.
Sounds good.
All right, man. Be cool.
Thanks, Jake.
Later,
Bye.
Man. Bye. Part 3 in the books with Peter Erskine. Pretty heavy day here on the Jake Feinberg Show. We'll be back tomorrow. Until then, peace.